Oh, friends, what a week. It's beshert that on this week we read the priestly blessing that we read today, holding our hands such, contains three of the most beautiful and awesome verses in the entire Torah. It's known in Hebrew as Birkat HaKohanim. And I have really been thinking about these verses in light of the events during the past 2 weeks. The first part of the blessing says, may God bless you and keep you. What is interesting to me is that the word you and keep you, bless you, is in the singular. So you might think that this is because the blessing is for us as individuals and not groups of people, but no. The rabbis come to us and they say the singular you is used here in the Torah in order to emphasize that the Jewish people are to be the recipients of God's blessings if we remain unified. We must be as one. We must be one body in our concern for fellow Jews wherever they live. We must realize that it is our responsibility to make sure that every Jew in the world is taken care of. So now I want to be honest. The past conflict, the conflict of the last 2 weeks, saw, in my opinion, a level of Jewish disunity, particularly among younger Jews. Particularly among younger Jews regarding Israel that I've never seen before. And it has certainly not been a factor in previous conflicts regarding Israel, such as the 73-year war when I was all of 21 years old. But I think that this has been coming for quite some time. There are several reasons for this. One of the many reasons is that young non-Orthodox Jews resented the relationship of Prime Minister Netanyahu with former President Trump. Another reason is the rise of what's known as intersectionality, cancel culture, and woke culture in the United States. Israel is now viewed wrongly as an oppressor nation, an oppressor of Palestinians, and that is paralleled with American racism and mistreatment of Native Americans. Jews are therefore being pushed out of social justice forums on race and LGBTQ issues, at least until they disavow Zionism in Israel. Another reason for this lack of unity could be the trip that Prime Minister Netanyahu took in 2015 to speak in front of Congress against the Iran deal. Many, especially younger Jews and those on the left, viewed this as a personal insult to President Obama. In my view, however, the Prime Minister was more than justified in coming to speak in front of Congress against an agreement that threatened the security of the State of Israel and which history has shown to be a bad agreement. Still another reason is that some of the most vocal younger critics of Israel have never been to Israel. Of course, making sure that younger people experience the land and the people of Israel has been something extremely important to me throughout my career. As I approach retirement, or as some would say, as I approach putting new tires on my car, I want to tell you, and I want to say to younger rabbis, I want to say to Rabbi Koren and to Rabbi Fisher, and rabbis elsewhere, that now more than ever, and I say this to the Jewish community, here in Greensboro and everywhere, now more than ever, we've got to get our kids to Israel. And sadly, folks, we need Jewish unity. Now, even in the face of not only what is happening in the Middle East, but also in terms of the documented increase in anti-Semitism in the United States. 3 days ago, people went into a diner in LA, asked, who is Jews here? When two people raised their hands, they beat them up. Yesterday, a Jew walking around with a kippah in New York, with the yarmulke in New York, was firebombed down in the Diamond District. The ADL has pointed out the increase of anti-Semitic occurrences and expressions that have taken place since 2016, and the ADL has warned us that a lot of these anti-Semitic expressions, which are on social media, could now go out into the rest of society. And now, because of what happened in the Middle East, it's now coming out big time and faster than anyone could have imagined. And sadly, we're also seeing Jews call for an end to military assistance to the state of Israel. And this really hurts. It hurts me personally because as one who has a lot of family there, as one who has dual citizenship, who has served in the IDF but is a loyal citizen of both countries, this is the most hurtful. Now, okay, I can accept that members of Congress such as Rashida Tlaib and Betty McCollum and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez want to cut aid. I can even accept that Bernie Sanders, a man with a Jewish background but with no real connection to the Jewish community, also wishes to cut aid. But what is the most painful of all is that young Jews are being attracted to organizations such as the anti-Zionist Jewish Voice for Peace, or an organization called If Now, Not Now, organizations which are extremely anti-Israel. And even more hurtful was J Street's endorsement of Congressman Betty McCollum's bill to make military aid to Israel conditional. By the way, think about this. These two things which Israel really needs right now from the United States are more Iron Dome interceptors and precision-guided munitions. Without the Iron Dome, many Israelis would have been killed from the more than 4,000 rockets. But think about this, without precision-guided munitions, many, and I mean many more Palestinians would have been killed as well. Ironically, withholding such funding, which is what the elected officials I just mentioned seek to do, will only increase the amount of death on both sides and will make the outbreak of another conflict occur much sooner. 25 years ago, the motto of the Jewish Federation of North America was, "We are one." Tragically, JFNA did away with that motto and probably will never bring it back. However, Jewish unity at this time in the United States and worldwide is incredibly important. And this is why we should heed the first blessing, which says, "May God bless you," singular. We are one. Now let's return to the priestly blessing. I've always felt that that "may God bless you" refers to our physical needs. God should bless us with food and clothing and shelter. However, after the last 2 weeks, I think that the prayer tonight is that God should bless the Jewish people, and especially the state of Israel, with the ability to defend and the necessary means to defend itself by itself. To defend itself by itself against terrorist organizations such as Hamas and others who wish to do her physical harm. In the recent conflict, listen to this you won't hear. Of the 4,000 plus rockets that were aimed at Israel, each one of them is a war crime because they were aimed at a civilian population, including my kids. More than 600 of those 4,000 rockets fell into Gaza and killed more than 50 people. You don't hear that on the television news stations. I mean, you're not going to read it in the New York Times, and you're not going to see it in the Washington Post that 50 rockets, that more than, 600 rockets fell and hit 50 people. Palestinians were killed by their own rockets. This is not widely covered. 90% of the remaining rockets, however, fell in non-civilian areas of Israel or were intercepted by Iron Dome. That being the case, friends, more than 350 rockets got through, causing great damage, many people to be hurt, and loss of life. It was not only Iron Dome which saved lives, but also the fact that Israel created shelters and safe rooms in homes and apartment buildings to protect its citizens. These safe rooms, one of which is in my own son's apartment, have double concrete. They are double steel reinforced concrete, and the shutters on them are steel reinforced. Perhaps in your children's apartment, they have a safe room, right? Same thing. But think about this. While Israel was making sure that there were bomb shelters and safe rooms in homes and apartments, Hamas was appropriating or stealing concrete which was imported into Gaza to make more than 60 miles of underground tunnels. 60 miles. So tonight I say, may God bless Israel. May God bless Israel with the ability to defend itself by itself. But the verse also says, may God bless you and keep you. To me, this means that Israel needs to make sure that its military might is not the determinative factor in its security and political considerations. Israel needs to be smart. Israel to make sure that it doesn't give Hamas another pretext to start a war. They'll find one anyway, but let's not give them one. Why will they be looking for one? All you have to do is read the Hamas charter. What does it say? It calls for the absolute elimination of Israel as a functioning country on the earth. So let's go back again to the priestly blessing. The second verse says, may God's light shine upon you and be gracious to you. In this verse, we ask God to deal favorably with us in an emotional, psychological way. The usage of the images of light and kingship to illustrate God's relationship to our mental, emotional well-being. Now, what would this mean in terms of the events of the past 2 weeks? For me, these words mean that emotionally, I should feel very proud to be a Jew. And I should feel very proud to be part of the Jewish people. I should feel a connection to every other Jew in the world. I should feel a connection not only to my family in Israel, but to all Israelis. And I should have both empathy and sympathy for those in Israel who spent much of the past weeks either in shelters or in safe rooms, or were constantly aware when they went out of their apartments, where's the shelter? Where can I take cover if I have 15 to 30 seconds to find shelter? I should take the pride and find the emotional resources to love Israel even as I do, even when disagreeing with its government on several issues. And I should find the emotional resources not to be silent, but to speak out in defense of Israel and in defense of its right to self-defense. And I should find the emotional and mental resources to let our members of Congress know that we support Israel and that military assistance to Israel, a country which is our greatest ally not only in the Middle East, but in the entire world, that military assistance is of critical importance to the well-being of Israelis and to maintenance of peace in the world. We need to find within ourselves now, as Jews, the emotional, the mental resources not to be silent, but to speak out, not to be a bystander on social media when Israel is attacked by 4,000 rockets, or by means of pernicious lies and anti-Semitic accusations. So now I go back once again to the priestly blessing, because the third verse says, may God lift up his face upon you and give you peace. Peace. The first part of the blessing asks God for our spiritual well-being. We need to feel God's presence in our lives at this time and to seek God's presence in others. All of us are created in Jewish teaching, B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. It is in that light that I want to mention the statement this week of Rabbi Rick Jacobs. It's this statement here that we handed out. The president of the Union of Reform Judaism. He says, halfway down that page, if you have it in front of you, as Reformed Jews, we support the human rights of Palestinians. They should be able to live in dignity and safety in their own country. And we mourn the tragic death of innocent Palestinians in Gaza. I couldn't agree with this statement more. I agree with it. So let's go back one more time. May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you, and may God be gracious to you. May God's face shine upon you. Your light shine upon your face and bring you peace. May God bless us and all of the people of Israel and the state of Israel with the physical, emotional, and mental and spiritual things that we need. And significant, the blessing says that if we are blessed in such a way, the end will be the lasting blessing of salam, shalom, peace. What is peace for Jews? Peace is something which combines our material, spiritual, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Peace is something that we as Jews have strived for throughout history, but we've rarely experienced. Peace, shalom, means freedom not only from disaster, it also means the freedom to have health, welfare, security, and tranquility. The Jew is required by his or her religion to do the utmost to preserve peace in the world. We are not only to be peaceful within ourselves, but also to help others be peaceful. Now, having said that, I want to bring us down to earth, because we should not forget what Rabbi Daniel Gordis, who, by the way, lives in Jerusalem, wrote in a column today. He maintains that the purpose of Israel is not to live according to liberal American Jewish values, but rather to protect Jewish lives and to provide a place of refuge for Jews the world over. So as we pray for peace and as we hope that Israel will live up to the highest of Jewish and universal values, let us not forget to be grateful that slightly more than a century after my relatives fled the pogroms in Russia, and slightly more, or 76 years, after the end of the Night of Terror for Jews in Europe, the Night of Terror which killed 6 million of our people, 1.5 million children, and members of my family, of your family, of our family. Let us not forget to be grateful that the state of Israel is strong, that the state of Israel has self-determination. And the state of Israel says at the bottom line that the day is over, world, when you can kill Jews with impunity. Rabbi Gordis also wrote, quote, I'm going to give you a direct quote now from him. He says, "These were 2 terrible weeks. And we have numerous challenges to face, more internally than externally." And let me just go away from that for something, because you don't know about this. But tomorrow night in Jerusalem, Jews and Arabs are coming together for a demonstration of coexistence. Oh, and what I heard today from my sister-in-law is all over the country, Jews and Arabs who live in Israel are coming together and say, this is not the way. We have to get along. We have to develop our country. We have to take care of our children and educate them and be healthy together, Jews and Arabs. Back to Rabbi Gordis. We have numerous challenges to face, more internally than externally. So we'll get to work, he says. But ask Israelis whether, after as devastating as these weeks were, if it was all worth it. And you'll hear, it's the price we pay to be home. And it's the price we'll continue to pay if we have to, because this time we are home to stay. Personally, I serve on the steering committee of the North American Zionist Rabbinic Coalition. And this week, the coalition issued a statement the end of which reads as follows, quote, "Moral clarity demands the courage not to be afraid to say that we proudly stand with Israel. We express our love and support for Israel, especially in its time of danger, in its eternal quest for peace, and its struggle against those forces who seek to attack or demonize it, whether it be by Jews or non-Jews." Statement ends up with the following sentence: "We pray for lasting peace and the fulfillment of the prophetic vision, when nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Friends, before I conclude, I want to apologize for giving a longer sermon than I practically have ever given on Friday night. There's sometimes just stuff that has to be said. So I hope you'll forgive me. But how do we end? You know how we're going to end tonight. In just a moment, we're going to hear sung the prayer for the state of Israel. And if you have a prayer book in front of you, turn to page 377. It'll be sung in Hebrew, but let's read 377 at the bottom of the page. The translation of the prayer for Israel. O Heavenly One, protector and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fulfillment of the fullness of joy for all who dwell there. And together let us say, Amen.